Welcome to the Touching into Presence podcast.
This podcast is for people who are interested in bodywork, empowerment, and somatic-based practices.
I am Nikki Olson.
I'm Andrew Rosenstock.
We are certified Rolfers.
Collectively, we're trained in various movement and bodywork therapies with an emphasis on somatic awareness and client resilience.
Through conversations, our goal is to share and explore mind-body paradigms to offer empowerment possibilities.
It was such a pleasure to be in conversation today with David Davis. David is a Rolf Structural Integration practitioner and instructor, recently relocated to Tucson, Arizona, where he continues to bring the beauty that is the work of Dr. Ida P. Rolf to his new home. During his first structural integration session, he anticipated relief from chronic pain and disability due to sports injuries, physical labor, and an auto accident. But he was in awe with a new sense of comfort, relaxation, and natural mode that resulted. As his body, mind, and spirit were awakened through the holistic manipulation of fascia and alignment of the body structure, David was inspired to begin a new life journey. He began his training at the Rolf Institute in 1976 and 1977, during the time when Dr. Ida P. Rolf was alive and Rolfing and Structural Integration were synonymous. The first session would lead him to becoming the 7th Rolfer in the state of Colorado, practicing the work for 45 years, and being an instructor for 33 years. David has been one of the most well-respected and sought-after teachers of SI nationally and internationally. In today's conversation, we spoke about David's experience as a Rolfer in the 70s, how to build a practice as an SI practitioner. There's a lot of great stories and anecdotes from a practitioner with over 40 years of experience, who studied with Dr. Rolf, Emmett Hutchins, Peter Melchior, and many other original Rolfers. We talk about technique versus process, David's concept of persona, seeing and body reading, and a ton more. So with that, let's begin our talk.
Morning, Andrew.
Good morning.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
We've had people reach out to us wanting to hear an interview from you. So you've been sought out with our audience. So that's pretty cool.
Years ago, I was going to put on my business card. I didn't do it, but I was going to put by luck or appointment only. And, just not that easy. I've never advertised to speak of. And, I've had a full practice since 1977. So, because, the best advertising is sending satisfied people out onto the street. Yeah. And I've been fortunate to send out a few.
What would you say your secret? What's your SI secret to stay in business? I know a lot of newbies would love to hear.
Well, the first
how to make a living.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I'm starting up a practice again here in Tucson after 46 years or 45 and a half years of doing the work. It's a different terrain now. And so it's a very interesting process, and I'm making inroads into the area. So that's the good news. But I think the most important thing is to believe in yourself and believe in the work. You either believe that the work works or you don't. And I have to say that not everybody has received the transmission, if you will, of the work in their own body, so that they got the message of what this work is and how it works and how it is a transformational process. Personal transformation. Yeah. And I was thinking about this tangentially a little bit, which is that, part of what we do in the basic series is that we open the doors of perception that people have shut down, and it gives people an opportunity to wake up. And some people are already on overload, so they're not so clear. They want to feel more, but easing the stress, let's call it the subcutaneous stress, is a huge thing. And just doing a great first hour actually has transformational qualities for people. So I think the first thing is that every body has a right way to be worked. And it's incumbent upon me as practitioner to not impose what I think they need on them, but to, if you will, start to unwind what is in there to be found. Like a lot of sculptors will say, well, I just revealed what was in the stone. And the same is true, I think, of this work, which is we're revealing what's inside the matter for people to wake up with or not, depending on what they do. So I think the important thing is that we as practitioners remember that the work is it's an inquiry into the human condition, as opposed to just a set of goals. And I always think that what we want to get in touch with is the principles and the intentions of the series and of the individual sessions. And that Dr. Rolf used to call the work personal structural integration. So the personal part got dropped off somewhere along the line, but that trinity of words says something that just structural integration or just Rolfing doesn't say. Dr. Rolf used to say that the word Rolfing was flattering, but it don't tell nobody nothing. And so it creates a vagary for interpretation and of what the work is, but she herself was not vague about what the work is. So really learning the basic series, principles and intentions, is so critical to making a living and doing this work. And if somebody devotes 5 years to learning the work, just learn this work. You don't have to add craniosacral. You don't have to add visceral. You don't have, in fact, I commend that you don't. And you just learn this. It's like, it's like learning a new instrument, and you have to practice. It takes time to practice and do the work. And by practicing, you gain more confidence. The first good person that you send out the door is, it's like, wow, that's cool. That was great. I love this stuff. And that love continues to grow with every session. And so, looking back, I used to do a lot of demos, public demos and stuff like that. That's not a bad thing to do in terms of getting, among other things, a wrap down about what it is that you're doing. And I think you should have a 1 minute, a 5 minute, and a 10-minute discourse. If somebody asks you what it is that you do, that you can be able to tell them intelligently, more or less what you do within the parameters of how you understand the work. And then, it either engages with this person or it doesn't engage with that person. But learning to talk about the work is critical. How you talk to a physician about it is real different than how you talk to the garbage man or somebody who does some kind of manual labor or one thing and another. So, and how you talk to somebody who does computer work all the time, they need to hear the message a little bit differently than somebody else. So learning how to tailor your message to the recipient, the beneficiary of what you have to say and what you have to offer in doing the work is critical. I had the great grace at one time in 1977 to do a public demonstration in Grand Junction, Colorado, and about 120 people showed up. I was blown away because Grand Junction's a bit of a backwater. Anyway, a lot of people were interested, and I had 40 people sign up. Holy cow, now I got to travel to Grand Junction. So, It's a wonderful book.
Wait, that's pretty impressive. Grand Junction in '77 to first get that many people to show up to hear this very vague Rolfing, and then to have people committed.
Yeah. The other thing that's important to remember for new practitioners is that we're educators. So if you think that, it's all about the manipulative work, then you've missed something significant. Because we have to communicate what we do, both through our hands and through the series, as well as out our mouth, so that people. I like to think of it that I need to create an invitation for people to want to come. I think they already want to come; they just don't know it. Right? They haven't heard it the right way yet, and so I'm creating an invitation for people to find out something about themselves, but also, part of it is moving, breathing, living a little more easily. A lot of people are looking for palliation of symptomatic aches, pains, and strains, but on the way, something else happens. And part of that is, changing one's perspective and opening the doors of perception, so that people start to have a different experience in physicality.
Well, I will say we are out the doors running. Editing the beginning of this will be fun because we just kind of started going. But this is all great, and really, it aligns with so much of what we already have talked about with other people, and I know what Nikki and I feel a lot is true about this work. And I just had 2 clients this morning who I saw, and like everything you're saying is true. One of them was able to meet her so well and lead her on, and the other one, I was able to meet her as much as I was able to meet her with where she was. But the key that wanted her to come back was not that I fixed her shoulder, because it wasn't possible to fix her shoulder, but it was about educating. It was a lot of were you aware of this? Can you notice this? And she started to have her own, I wasn't aware of that before, building her own education of her own experience. And that's why when she did leave, and I truthfully was not as content with what I would have liked to have seen, with what would have going in, but I also knew that there's a bigger story there that I'm not going to be able to get to in one day. It's going to take time, and that education piece for her was really the takeaway. That's in fact, I was talking with a friend just before this about how people don't do homework a lot of the time. We give them exercises, they don't do homework, and I never thought of it this way, but I think this will tie in, which is that I said the homework that I give them is inquiry. It's having them feel themselves in a different way, and once you start to feel that or notice that, you do it whether you're trying to do it or not. It happens, and that's where a lot of this education comes in, is how am I feeling in my body in this world.
In a standard whatever that is, first hour, Peter Melchior used to say he's never seen anybody do a first hour that's too superficial, and which is an interesting notion. And the other part is that he always used to say, reach in, find the level that meets you, and that you meet it, and then back out just a little bit to give the body space to change. And I think it's one of our challenges is to think that, I'm doing all the work. I'm the practitioner, and there's folly in that. And somewhere down the line, that attitude gets a good dose of humble, because we're I think less important than we like to think that we are, and yet we are a pole by which some kind of catalyzing pole that it becomes a reference for people, and they get to start to move a little bit differently. But briefly back to first hours, is that a lot of people in a first hour actually take a breath for the first time in whenever. And that in itself is inspiration. First session is an inspiration and an invitation to be able to breathe, to walk and move in a different way, and to occupy the space of the body and the presence in a different way. Sets up a new set of options, let's say, some that may or may not be on somebody's horizon, and some that are clear over the horizon still. And that initiates the starting of the process of the basic series. It's huge what happens just in a first hour, and we tend, it's easy to downplay that, but people have never been touched the way that we do. There isn't another process like this. And, the genius of Dr. Rolf was to, put it into a format, a series that gives us an opportunity to touch people's lives in a new way, in a way they haven't been touched before, and to allow for change to happen in their life, their relationship, and everything else. Huge. I think it's easy for people to, especially, I'll say the word newbies, to think that it's just about, the physicality of the work. And one has to expand one's horizons. Dr. Rolf used to say, I'm working on all levels of layers of the human condition, but the body's the only thing I can get my hands on. So since the body's the only thing that we can get our hands on, that's what we get. That's the medium that we work through to touch the being. So part of what she used to say is that, there's something that we talk about in this work was the core sleeve relationship. And a lot of people have tried to make it about extrinsic musculature, myofascial structures, and intrinsic myofascial structures. And that is one way to look at it. But she used to say that the sleeve is the human and the core is the being. So we work through the human to awaken the being, or the being's experience inside the body. And, that notion has fallen way into the background of I think, modern presentation, but it's still part of the work. It's and that's
nice.
That's part of what we do. What Dr. Rolf also said is that the work is for the practitioners as much as anybody else. Because it's an inquiry into the human condition, and it helps us to grow in ways that we couldn't imagine ourselves growing into, for, and toward, unless we got the work, received it in such a way that there was a transformational quality that happened inside our own body and being, where we went, I like this stuff. If I could give one person what I got out of my basic series, that would be really great. And if I could give two, that would be even better. And, it's with that kind of inspiration that I still work. I still love and revere my original practitioner, Don Johnson.
I love that how you tapped into that, because I teach intro to SI to the advanced curriculum for the local Boulder massage school. And I always lead into, first kind of give a little history of what Rolfing is, and really spend time on talking about how Dr. Ida Rolf, how she created this. And in my perspective, I think there's some importance of the timing of it all, of being a human potential movement, and the importance of that. And that, because sometimes with when you're teaching the class, to me, it's important, yes, that I'm giving the angle of what SI is, coming from more of the principal's point of view, and that yes, we're working with the structure and everything like that, but it's really kind of discovering who we are in this body, and really spending time with that. So the class is a lot of experientials of feeling into themselves and and just kind of coming back to really understand what SI is to really understand yourself as a body. And then you use yourself and that experience to be able to understand what you're going to do with someone else. And really kind of moving away from the idea. I mean, I don't talk about, I mentioned that there's the 10 series and all that. Certainly not teaching it. And it's always interesting because the students sometimes are coming, they're looking for techniques. They're looking for fun ways to do the structure. And so it's a little nervous wracking for me because, I want to set up a successful class for them, but also, that they have to, if they really want to understand SI, they got to take a deep dive in their own structure.
Well, and their own experience. And part of what this work does, there was a great philosopher back in the late 60s and 70s. His name was Alan Watts, and he wrote a book called The Wisdom of Insecurity. And, people who are always relying on technique, I think, may have insecurity issues because you can lean on technique, but it loses sight of process. And the work is much more of a process than a technique. There's a gazillion techniques involved in 81 session, but which one should I do now? What should I do this time? Whoa! The work forces us to be creative, and so our artistic urge toward artistic work starts to come forward as technique dissipates, and that's a beautiful thing. Peter Melchior used to say that we have to remember that the process that we're involved in is life itself, and that that when somebody comes to us, they're letting us, shall we say, slide into their life for a few moments, and then eventually, we'll leave the river of their life. But the work invites us to start to look at what is life itself. And so there are very broad questions that are involved in this work. And Dr. Rolf, was occupied with those things, both exoterically and esoterically. She didn't leave anything else, she would say, metaphysics is just physics we don't understand. And, that was pretty radical thing to say back in the 70s. So, we're expanding the field of understanding about what the work is, as well as we learn and grow, finding out who we are. And, I was one of the authors in the John Lodge project. And one of the things John reminds us of is that, our work as practitioners is to be consciously aware of how we're moving through time, space, gravity, and matter. And that's a full-time project. Doesn't just let us off the hook, so it's demanding us, if you will, to be increasingly awake and in our own somatic experience, and that's part of the transmission that we put into the body and the being who and hangs out on our table for a little while. More happens in the session that is beyond description than that which is describable. So you can talk about, hydrating the fascia. However, that fascia has been holding on for some kind of personal reason. I've coined a word for this. It's the persona, how the personality shapes the soma. And so once we start to and that includes traumatic experience, our relationship with trauma in our life, but starting to get breath and vitality into these stuck in, if you will, dark corners of physical existence is not out of the question about what this work is about. That certainly wasn't for Dr. Rolf. She was into spiritual growth herself. So people don't come to me for spiritual growth, but a little bit might rub off in the process.
So, David, I mean, this is all amazing stuff, and we could take nuggets and nuggets out of this and dissect and spend meditations on that, and maybe we'll come back to that. I guess something I'm very curious about, and I'm sure people listening are, is like, what brought you to this work? How did you find Rolfing, become a Rolfer? What was that process like for you?
In 1964, I was a junior in high school, and I took an experimental class called psychology. And we didn't even have a textbook. That's how new that was in terms of, shall we say, old school reality. And so we subscribed to a new magazine called Psychology Today. And in that, and then we would read the articles and discuss them and one thing and another. And in that that year, there were 3 articles by a man named Sam Keen. He's a philosopher, and it was about the article was entitled "Sing the Body Electric," and it was about his experience at the hands of Dr. Rolf. And as I read those articles, the letter stood off the page about 4 inches, and I was like, "Well, that's cool. That's interesting. Wow, didn't happen on any of the other articles or anything else." So I felt touched by the word Rolfing, and just as an entree. In the fall of 1966, I was in a nasty auto accident. I was a passenger in a car that flipped at about, we were probably doing about 50 miles an hour, and rolled the car and landed on the roof. And the roof was on the dashboard of the car, but it was a 57 Ford, no seatbelts. So I landed on my head in the footwell, and the other guy landed on top of me. So I had a closed head injury and a pretty nasty case of whiplash. And then cut to 1973. I had, 1970 is when Peter and Emmett, who were the first practitioners, Rolfers, if you will, moved to Boulder. And I had some friends who were starting to get work from them, and they were raving about it. I lived down in the southern part of the state at the time. And I was really stoved up by that time from the whiplash and also sports injuries. I wrestled up into college. So when I heard about this guy, Don, in Santa Fe, my first session, I was so excited. I couldn't get a ride, so I hitchhiked 150 miles one way to get to work. And the first session was like a revelation for me. And actually, within about 10 minutes, I started having a feeling of knowing what was coming next. And I started to see colors, which I think now was seeing my aura from the inside out. And, I took a breath for the first time in a long time. And in the process, I got an inch taller at the age of 25. And I got taller than my dad. So I started being able to see over my dad's head. And that was, that it's an interesting piece of the story, which is that, we change structure, which changes posture. And if you think of posture as being like attitude, Russia's posture toward the Ukraine is thus and such, all kinds of attitudes have the potential to fade into the background with the emergent quality that starts to take place within the body, or if you will, core lift and core experience. So that was a revelation to me. And then in those days, you had to get letters of recommendation from your Rolfer, your advanced Rolfer, and your patterner. Judith Aston did patterning at that time. So you had to have 3 recommendations from practitioners in the field at that time. And that was to get in to get an interview to be able to find out if you got into a class. And we did reject people in those days. Anyhow, it was a sorting out process. I had to go back to college and finish school to be able to get in for the interview as well, which gave me a chance to study anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, stuff like that. And but I just always felt like, wow, this is what I want to do. If I could do this stuff, this would be great. And I always thought that it would be a great stepping stone to whatever's next. And it still is. It keeps unfolding before me. Life keeps unfolding before me, and opening, if you will. I think that's the nature of something that happens by virtue of doing this work.
That's very similar to me. That I had gotten Rolf in college. Loved it. And then, but it wasn't something I immediately thought that was what I was going to do. But then a lot of different things happened. After I finished college, I putzed around for a little while, but Rolfing kept on coming back to me. And I was like, well, I'll go to the school and then there'll be a stepping stone for what's next. And because I thought I was going to go to occupational therapy school, but I was like, I don't want to do a bunch of school right now, but right. I want to do something. I want to get in the field. And then I never went to OT school and I've still been doing this for 20 something years.
Right. And, what we do is unique. And that's part of the challenge of talking to people in the public about it, which is that it's so unique because what we're talking about is a perceptual phenomena that to somebody who hasn't had it. And so it makes it very difficult to talk about the perceptual kinds of things that happen, the enhancement of perception, the doors of perception opening, the way I perceive myself, how I move in time, space, gravity, and matter. These are huge, huge things that all the normal people out there have a very difficult time relating to, because those of us who, if you will, break out of our shell of normal, then it opens up a whole world of potential, as Andrew was saying, human potential, and we become the experiment and the experience. In the 1978 Rolf Institute annual meeting, and it was Dr. Rolf's last annual meeting, but she sat up in front of us, and it was, in those days, the Institute was over corner of 3rd and Pearl, and we were sitting in the classroom back there, and it was about 100 of us, and which was most of the population of practitioners in those days, and she sat up front of the room and was with her glasses on and her magnifying glass, roses in her hair, and she was looking at a legal pad, and we were all online, very extrinsic experience of the line, and but she says, that's another thing. I've started an experiment and you're it. And we're still it. We don't necessarily know that we're it, but we're an experiment and an experience in process that round and around she goes, and where she stops, nobody knows. We're opening in a way that like my parents would never have conceived or allowed something like that to happen. The kind of opening that's intrinsic with this work that we as practitioners are busy embodying. We're embodying something, and most, the average folks, which is fine, aren't looking toward that experience of embodying something more than their persona.
Yeah, that's that little pause is both Nikki and I trying to figure out who's going to talk next, because they're both also. I'd say the quandary with this talk is I almost don't want to ask. I just kind of want to sit back and just really listen and absorb, because there's so much being said here that is one, how I feel or where I've been moving towards, because I started off more as a technique person. That's maybe what brought me in, was more of the physical, and I've shifted over the years to more of this. So hearing someone speak what you agree with is always nice, especially when it's said in such a way, and then with all the accoutrements, the action. Like, it's one thing for me to say something; it's another thing. It's one thing for me to talk about Ida or Peter. I'm talking second or third hearsay, and when you're speaking about it, it's direct experience, which just adds a lot more to it. So I don't actually have a question right now. I'll see if Nikki does.
Well, I was fortunate. So I audited with Emmett in 1976, spring of 1976, and I met Dr. Rolf at the 1976 annual meeting, which was at the Garden of Allah in San Francisco, and it was a retreat center, and I was walking along, and there were a lot of people around, and my view is, when you have a great teacher, and she was an esteemed teacher for me, don't bother them with stupid questions. And so I was, not trying to impose on her, because I felt like there was, plenty on her for running the show there. And she pointed her crooked index finger at me, and she goes, "You there, young man, come over here." And so I did, and I sat down, and it was like sitting in a spotlight that had a breeze to it as well. And so she asked me, who I am and where I was in my training, one thing and another. And we talked for, I like to say, a short eternity. It could have been 20 minutes. But when we got done, she said, "I want you in my last class." And unfortunately, I wasn't able to be in that class because they'd already filled it with everybody'd already paid, and it was starting in a month. I kept saying, "So make a new space," but it was a double class. It was an advanced training concurrent with training. So there were a lot of people in the room. So I actually did sit in on a number of classes, and being around Dr. Rolf was a wonderful thing. For the first 13 years of my practice, I really towed the line, so to speak, with Emmett style work and one thing and another. I worked almost exclusively with my fingertips, a little bit of hard elbow work and one thing and another. And then I met Peter. And, Peter did my advanced series, but I got to hang out in the classroom with him, and we became teaching proteges for 14 years. And I was really honored with that. And Peter was so difficult to interpret. What the hell was he doing? Because there wasn't anything linear about it. And over the years, what I realized is that Emmett always worked the line, and gravity. And Peter worked the base of support and how it supports the space, which are two really radically different ways of working that. So Peter worked the space to create the opportunity for a central vertical axis to express itself. And and Emmett worked on, let's get that line wakened up in there and make it come alive, so to speak. So Peter was a very soft touch, and so it was really beautiful to watch people transform under his hands, and so over the years, we got to teach a number of classes together. I don't know, maybe 8. And, it was grace. And he was, Peter, Dr. Rolf's first teacher. And he was a poet. So he was a man of not too many words, and he was mostly real quiet. And but he didn't waste his words. He didn't waste his breath. He moved people with eloquence, and I think that the eloquent aspect of the work has kind of faded into the background, and because it is eloquent medium of transmission about something of the human experience that is not, we don't encounter every day. There, that's more ponderables for you, huh?
Yeah. I echo with Andrew. It's kind of lost. I have a lot of questions, but also in a moment of pause. But I think the question I have is really on point with what we're talking about. And I reached out to somebody who had requested to have you on the podcast. And I was like, well, what's so interesting? What do you want to hear more about? And they mentioned this person, I believe, has received sessions from you. And they were talking about your ability to see and like the body reading. And I think I would love to hear more about that, because it sounds like, you're coming to the work more about the human potential and not so much doing a body reading off of biomechanical imbalances. So what's your body reading like? What's your style?
Well, that is a great question, because that's what seeing has been reduced to, because not too many people are seeing. And Dr. Rolf was always about seeing, and she saw through people, there's countless stories about how she would be looking in one direction and telling somebody behind her, oh, what you're looking for is, under the third finger of your left hand or something. And so what I look at is, in terms of seeing, is, and instead of just being an ocular phenomenon, consider the possibility that your heart can see more clearly than your eyes. And so part of it is to see, where is this person in their larger process, their evolutionary process? Is this person real stuck in, whatever pattern or one thing and another? You have to see what kind of structural patterns have been ingrained into their system. But then the other part is, what's that deeper layer that's taking place inside body and being, and how might they be able to evolve a bit in terms of waking up their heart, and ideally being able to listen to what their heart is telling them. So seeing is a whole body phenomenon. It's looking with the whole body, not just the eyes. And then that's, I find that there's resonance and dissonance, shall we say, that can take place with that way of looking and seeing. But it's for me, it's a very intuitive and telepathic process. And then last but not least, I trust my hands implicitly, and that might be back to that earlier question about new practitioners in terms of trust. But my hands like to go where they need to go, and so as I look at the session at hand and what looks like needs to be done, I like to ask a question, which is where to begin. because wherever I start changes the whole session. It shapes, if you will, the content, the context, and the creativity of the session, and if there's a series, the whole series. So I asked that question of myself, where to begin with this person, and that of course depends on the session itself, the context. If it's a second session, it's different than a first session. But so briefly, I look at where this person is and how they are in their own body. Are they comfortable in their own skin, or are they doing something else? I want to get people more comfortable in their own skin, and then that can progress to something deeper in terms of their experience of being in their own skin and how they are there. So using the heart and the soma as the body is a profound sensor. We have no shortage of nerve endings in our hands, but the same is true of our whole body. And when and as the body becomes more open to, shall we say, receptive to feeling all kinds of things, then I get subtle cues off of people's bodies as well, and I trust those as well. So the technique of body reading is a technique of reading bodies, and it requires interpretation. Right. So what that does is that shoots you into your head and your intellect. How do I shape this? How do I intellectually engage in this particular process? Whereas there is, I believe, always a deeper meaning to the session in the series, and that part of that is also transmitting from the heart rather than just the intellect. I hope that helps.
It does. It totally does. And I can't help but mention how that skill really has to be refined, because I think it could be a slippery slope of, as the body reader, bringing ego in and being like, I know what's going on with you and you just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate you talking from the heart, and just, I feel like, what would you say though to people who are possibly shifting their lens of seeing from less of a body mechanic way to a looking at their soma and the more of the person and not their parts? How to do it and refine it, and not slip into a place of ego.
Oh, the big E raises its ugly head again, it's always lurking to raise its head, so for those folks who are thinking about changing, I think that, again, it comes back to the question of trust. Your heart is an intelligence beyond your brain, beyond the intellect. There's a very interesting, there's a book that I really like by an author. His name is Joseph Chilton Pierce, and he wrote a book called The Biology of Transformation. And he said, when the heart serves the brain, we have a very different experience than when the brain serves the heart. So we impose the intellectual, shall we say, tension on heart and lungs, the cardiopulmonary system, so it's not able to actually relax and resonate within the body, we can move to that. we could start to open the bodily experience, shed, if you will, our fears, because if technique is for anybody who's not feeling real secure with the work, then that's a fear, and that's something to dissipate within the body. Part of what the UCLA study in 1976 with Rosalind Bruyere was Rosalind was an aura reader who was she was hooked up with a mic, but it was the first time that an aura reader was proven to be accurate. So the electromyographic readings that were acquired in that study were completely coherent with the color frequency changes that Rosalind was reading throughout the entire 10 series. And so what we know is that changes the whole field as well. The energetic field around us, that, we're a field as well as a body. And so there's a lot of subtle changes that take place in the field, the subtle bodies, if you will. And, you can study those as well. There's, that falls into the mystical category, but I'm a firm believer that Dr. Rolf was a mystic first and a scientist after, in part because she was studying yoga and tantric yoga back in the 19-teens before she, got her doctorate. So she was already, on a course or a path to bring those two together. But the world wasn't ready to hear about the mystical part of her journey. And I think that that is a critical part of how she developed the series as well. She got inspiration and to develop the series. The very step of someone stepping away from not just doing palliative relief work is huge, and the step from just like an osteopath or a chiropractor, well, I just do this, and this, and then come back in a week or two or whatever it is, but to evolve, to weave a coherent series that has a beginning, a middle, and an end is a really powerful thing. And that's the other thing I'd say to new practitioners is trust the series. Trust the series as you learn it, which is to say, as it teaches you. The sessions that you have the most difficulty doing are the ones that you need to learn the most. They have special things to teach you about yourself as well as, other people and other bodies. And then, that evolves, your quality of work as well.
David, can I add on maybe another way of wording something and see what your take is on this in regard to that, which is in regards to body reading. I think of when I first started, I was very much the angle of the elbow and all that sort of stuff. And even today, one of my clients started to walk, and she said, "Oh, I'm really familiar with this, because I go to the PT and they have me do this." And then, I asked her what she was noticing, and she gave me everything. And she said, "What are you noticing?" And I said, "I'm not really looking for anything. In fact, I'm looking for what isn't seen. I'm looking for the sense of what am I not seeing, whatever that may be. And that is going to inform me about that, and that the not seeing is a seeing of sorts."
Yeah, a variation on the theme is to not look directly at a person. We tend to go, "Oh, I got to focus on this," and but to soften the eyes as well as the brain and look to the side. So use a little bit of peripheral vision as another way to see things and see what you see, because there's something to be seen from there as well. But we tend to think that we have to just focus, if you will, straight ahead, and there's a lot more to be seen there. And I'm always interested in how is the spine distributing weight? how is it free, or how is it lashed to the rest of the systems of the body, and compounded by the gravitational influence? How is all of that expressing itself in this particular body, the body at hand? You can get really involved with arm angles and one thing and another, but Peter used to say, look at what's right and make it better, which is real different than look at what's wrong and make it better. And there, as Peter used to say, if they walked in the door, there's a lot more right going on than wrong. And so you need to entertain that and see how you can make that better, how you can get that those aspects of physicality to start to support the system, so that the body becomes a more self-supporting system that doesn't have, shall we say, an imbalance of tension holding it together, but rather that there starts to be a fluidity in the system that allows the bones to float in the shall we say, ocean of fascia that is starting to not just be a tensional membrane, but also, as we hydrate it, then part of what happens is it changes, the fascial network is a three-dimensional memory matrix. Couldn't recite a fact, but it remembers our relationship with events, traumatic and otherwise. And so, that's I think part of the seeing is how is all of this stuff pieced together? How is this person parsed themselves together to be able to stand up? Everybody who comes in the door is at some level in survival mode. So how can we move them beyond survival mode into something that's more comfortable? And that is a huge gift.
Yeah, and even I'll add in that there's that peripheral vision is, when you take it in with peripheral vision, that's parasympathetic nervous system versus sympathetic, fight or flight is actually focused. So when we can bring in peripheral. Thank you. I was going to say peripheral vision, and we're not staring at our clients. They can also not be stared at, which allows them to be less in a direct tensioning membrane, because they're able, their nervous system can say, hey, I'm less on stage in a way, right? And it continues to influence each other, to allow them to actually be in a place where they can be less held together in tension.
That reminds me of, back to the question of seeing, is that seeing is also listening as well. So I try to listen to my clients, what their footfall sounds like when they're coming down the hall. That says something about their, the attitude that they're bringing into the room. Hypothetically, it could be that, oh man, the traffic was so bad and blah, blah, blah. But, there's, I try to listen to all of that. And then I watch how they move while they're in clothing. I don't, I do most of my seeing while they're in their clothing, because there's not that, for lack of a better word, confrontational quality of take off your clothes and I'm going to look at you. And eventually we get to that. But, I do a lot of looking while they're still in their clothes. Two, a lot of times I'll have them stand and I'll look at them while they're in their clothes. Take your shoes off for sure. But, the clothing really give the wrinkles in the clothes and stuff like that give us something of a different sense about the story of how it is to be in that body. So there's a lot of clues, if you will. In the gambling world, they'd say, oh, there's a lot of tells. And so you start looking for those tells, those subtle messages of how they are in their bodily experience, as well as what you see structurally. So seeing is more than just a structural phenomenon. How has this person piece themselves together, as if you will, a fragmented person, because that's effectively what the term random body is like, is that the various and sundry parts and pieces aren't communicating as a whole. It's a bunch of parts that haven't been united or reunited. I had a great experience. I used to work in Madrid, Spain, and I was walking in the Retiro, which was a large park that the royalty used to be in, but it's a national park now, and in the city center. And I had been out running, and so as I was walking and cooling down, I saw a Rolf body, but it wasn't one of my people. I was like, whoa. They've had good work. That's really cool. So I started following this woman, and then I thought, well, maybe it's better. So I kind of sidled up next to her. Well, it turned out to be a woman named Lael Keene, who is, she's the daughter of Sam Keene. Back to, it's a circular world here. And I said, "Oh, Lael, what are you doing here?" Well, she'd just gotten done teaching a class in Italy and was on a layover in Madrid. So she went to the Retiro to walk. So we had a really nice reunion talking. But there's something that happens when somebody organizes in verticality that is unique and different from everybody else who is, if you will, fighting with gravity. There's something that happens when the positive pole and the negative pole come into vertical alignment, and there's a different expression of in the nervous systems and the rest of the body, and how we move through time and space. So it's and gravity, and so it's a powerful thing that still is not well known in the world we live in. And that's our job, is to, communicate so that people can hear what we're talking about, so that it speaks to them at a deeper level than just their intellect, and kindles something in them so that they want to come in and get some work.
I love that story of Lael Keene. She was my teacher. I did my final phase with her. Yeah, I was one of the few who were able to do the dual certification. So I did it with her and Monica Kaspari in Brazil.
Oh, nice. Uh-huh. So you were in Rio or Sao Paulo?
Florianopolis.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, I'm not sure if that's where she lives, but our training was on her compound, and it was amazing. It was beautiful, right down the road from the beach. It was like so perfect.
Somebody had to do it.
Yep. So to be sensitive of everybody's time, I would love to wrap with a question about, just would love to hear any kind of insight, since you got to work, with kind of the earlier pioneers, you being a pioneer, met Dr. Ida Rolf. What do you think is important to share that you have direct insight with or experience with? I like a little history question.
I just did the legacy symposium with Yossi the other day, and so there were 4 questions, and so I started writing one morning. I meditate daily, and before I received this work, I couldn't sit to meditate. There was too much frenetic energy in the body and mind, and that dates back to auto accident and whiplash and all kinds of stuff like that. But anyway, I was thinking about stuff, and I wound up writing 6 pages, both sides of what would be important to convey here. It's all important. And I think the important thing is that we as practitioners need to receive a lot of work so that we are able to, shall we say, clear our channels clear our stuff so that we can transmit something to the public. And the as we move more freely in our own bodily experience, we like to say you can't take anybody any further than you've gone in your own experience. So in a very real sense, if I haven't cleared something in this experience, then somebody on the table isn't going to let me touch that part in them. And there's a knowing that takes place. There's a communication in our fields that takes place. So, we have this ongoing process of waking up and letting go of, EGO and all of the other stuff, so that we can express something more than, just egoic stuff, to the degree that we can become a field of peace and harmony within our own body and being. Then that becomes part of our transmission, and that is something that is in our human potential, and to transmit that to somebody is real different than just shall we say technique to clear this pattern or clear that pattern. And so I had a really neat experience. I used to trade work for 40 years with a guy named Jason Kane. Jason lived in Boulder. He was one of Ida's boys, and he was Emmett's assistant when I audited in 1976. And at one point, we're working along. He was working on me, and he was left-handed. And he goes, my right elbow is just killing me. I think I'm going to have to quit. It's really bothering me. And we talked about it before, but he never articulated it quite like that. And so I sat upright and I said, excuse me, that's not going to happen. I have vested interest in this, and you're not quitting. And he goes, great, because I'm really starting to get this stuff. I think, and it's like, wow, well, he was good in 76. And so I think it's important to remember or realize that this work has a very steep learning curve that doesn't abate with time. So the work is always demanding us to learn stuff that we wouldn't just learn intellectually or otherwise. And so, the embodiment piece and clearing the soma is really an important piece of this work that we really haven't articulated that well yet, I think, and at least for the public. And so waking up, getting more comfortable in the body, and then allowing the body to be a self-sustaining, self-supporting organism in the field of gravity is really powerful. And then last but not least, the question arises, what is integration? And right, that's a big word. It's a bunch of syllables, and but it's there's a principle here, and part of it is for somebody to awaken and feel grounded and connected from the ground up, and from also the top down. I was just teaching a class in Kauai last month, and a practitioner with 20 some years of experience got off the table and was like, wow, I'm connected in a new way. This is really neat. They were connected when they walked in, right? But I just want to emphasize that there's always a deeper layer that can open up, and that continuing to get work, because doing the work takes a toll on us, both as psycho-emotionally. You don't want to take that stuff home. That ain't mine. I don't want it. So we have to continually clear, shall we say, our cellular structure as well as our fascial matrix, so that we can, have good communication with the center, with our own center. It can be the central vertical axis, it can be the line, but also, it has to do with the container, the space of the body, and how we walk in the world. Hard work, but somebody's got to do it, and it's fun. There isn't anything else like it. It's grace. So I hope that answered your question.
It does. Yeah. No, I mean, everything that you've been saying has been beautiful. And I would agree. The work is really fun, and fun in a way that keeps you, I always feel challenged in a good way, and as keeps me as a learner. And there's one more question I want to ask, and and if you feel like it's going to just open up too big of a bag, we can pass it. But do you think Ida would be happy in the evolution of how the Rolf Institute for structural integration? I mean, I know it's kind of packing in a lot of different perspectives of different schools and histories, but just going back to you're mentioning how Dr. Ida Rolf came at this from more of a kind of a spiritual realm, but the way it was being taught was a little bit more like the 10 series and maybe a little bit more in the Soma. I just would love to hear what your thoughts would be if we're honoring the work and evolving in the way that she had attended.
Tough to tell what her intentions were, right? She started an experiment, and we're it. And there's a lot of practitioners who think that she really wanted to make an impact in the medical field. And that is possible. The challenge, of course, with that branch of the tree is that one doesn't get totally absorbed by the medical model, so that one forgets one's own roots. And the spiritual roots, if you will, of this work are being written out of the narrative, in my opinion. So then, there's some that thought that it was going to be, an energetic component to the work, and there would be a school for that. There were going to be 3 schools across the country was part of the, primary vision, which has happened and not happened. And so, there's quite a few schools now. The important thing is that the work is out in the world, and I suspect that Dr. Rolf has rolled over in the grave more than once over all the stuff that has happened in her name. She said an interesting thing. This is a Peter story, and I hope this is germane. But he said that she said when it came time to sign over the documents for the use of her name in the Rolf Institute, which she objected to for years. And when she finally signed for it, and Peter and Rosemary Fidus were the 2 people who signed on behalf of the Rolf Institute. But she said that I'm opposed to this because disagreements between my teachers now are about their discussions about pieces of the work and the importance of the work, and their opinion as well as informed discussion. But she said when the institute becomes an institution, then those disagreements get institutionalized, and that power groups will form behind this teacher or that teacher. And she said, 10 years after I die, there's going to be a split in the organization. 10 years after she died, there was a split in the organization, which, was painful. It was painful for everybody involved. So she wouldn't have resonated with that, I think. But, the work is out in the world, and it's touching people. And what I think would be important Chancellor Tan said this at the Legacy Symposium, is that, we all need to be on the same page. All structural integrators need to have common purpose in design and education, so that, we're all working with the same stuff, and thereby, we can have a more united presentation out in the world, because I think that not all of us are doing the same thing. Not that we have to do the same thing, but, our foundation, our base of support in the basic series, I think, is important for us all to represent in a good way, in a consistent way. Because there's genius in the basic series. Yeah. Nobody contests that. There's real genius in the basic series. So carry that forward. And then one other piece that I wanted to add is that everybody who comes in has something to teach me. So for, new practitioners and the like, and also, old hands, everybody's here to teach me something. I don't know what it is when they first come in, but, that's part of the unwinding as we learn and we develop a deeper working relationship. Then we find out what that is. And, it's a real blessing. And it's grace that happens with doing this work every day, or every day that we work.
Again, a pause from Nikki and I to just take it in. Yeah, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I
this is helpful and beneficial for you and that it's your community.
Yeah, I mean, it's to some extent. I'll speak for myself. I won't speak for Nikki, though. I think she probably feels similar. It is somewhat less about us, although we're a part of it, and we're not doing this fully for us. We're doing it for the community. And and this is one of the things I spoke with you about in our pre-call, is that there's a lot of people, and this actually ties in a bit to what you're saying. There's a lot of people who go to one school and know that school's story, and they don't know the other stories for the same family. So there are cousins and cousins that we don't really know about. And some of the schools sort of idolize certain people and villainize other people. And I was guilty of that. I'm still guilty of it. There are some schools I still just don't love, but I think it's really important to at least get the voices out there and get some other perspectives out there, because otherwise we don't grow. I mean, and there was something you said I thought was really important about the growth, was about like getting the work, continuing to get the work done. Like that is something that isn't really talked about. And I happened to figure that out accidentally, where I was just getting work because I needed something. And that like single sessions would expand, which is like, and I would get work done by people who were in the same school, but also other schools. And maybe I didn't like everything about it, but it also informed me of more. And I also tried to get sessions from some lineage holders, or maybe not lineage holders, but elders would be a better term. So
senior practitioners.
Senior practitioners. Yeah. When I'm in, and I don't love them all, but like when I'm in Boulder, I try to see Jim Asher once when I'm there, because Jim's been doing this longer than I've been around. Not that makes him great, but I just happen to really vibe with him. And I've seen other senior practitioners who I think, well, I like talking with them, but I don't want them to touch me again.
Right. You still have to be discriminating. Yeah. Some people are, let's just say they may not be on the same frequency you are. They may not be moving in the direction that you are. And that's okay. They're where they're at. You're where you're at, and we're all in flux.
Yeah, and it's teaching going on. First of all, getting what I want doesn't always help me. It just keeps me stuck in my own ideas. But there's other there's oh, that's interesting. I never thought about doing that before. It's all education. It's all, as we say, it's all gravy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I had the privilege of trading with Emmett for 10 years. And, I learned a lot doing that. And so anytime you can sit and be with a senior practitioner and maybe trade, if you can get a trade, that's great. And if you can work with the same person consistently for some period of time, highly recommend that as well. Just so that you have a consistency of the information, if you will, that you're putting into the body, the transmission, if you will.
Yeah, that's actually what that's more personal. I'm trying to find where I am right now to find an older practitioner, someone who's been doing it more than 10 years. I mean, if I get even older than that, it'd be great. And just work together and kind of say, hey, let's continue to evolve each other in whatever we're doing.
Yeah, co-evolve. What a concept. But that's the great life.
Yeah.
And that's how we move, and when we're not stuck or immersed, if you will, in our own limitations, then somebody else moves us beyond that, and it's profound learning.
Yeah, I want to really just thank you for I'm gonna probably not even thank you for enough. Not just the time and in the stories, but you. And thank you for the work you've done and the life you've had that's brought it in the people you're affecting, because that's partly why we found you as well. And I just feel like I've gotten such a gift today. So I'm really grateful. Yeah, grateful for that. And I just want to thank you for being with us today.
Great, good pleasure. And we can play again another time.
Yeah,
I would like that.
Thanks, David. And yes, but we probably will need to at some point have another call. I actually really enjoy when we have people on for second calls, because this is just like the first hour. Sometimes I say is like a first date. In some way, this is like a first date where we're, getting to know each other a little bit here and there. And the second one is another layer is kind of removed, and we're grooving and diving, and it's fun.
As well as should be.
Yeah.
That's the potential, is to have fun doing this instead of it being work. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah. There's a process of revelation that takes place in doing this work and receiving this work, and in the communion of practitioners, just being able to talk back and forth like this. So wonderful.
Yeah, it's really nice.
So thank you for doing this.
Our pleasure. Thanks. It's been awesome. And we'll see you when we see you.
Indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for emerging from your quiet spell.
It's only been 46 years. I'm really good at weaving a cocoon.
Yeah. Well, best of luck with your relocation in Tucson. Hopefully that works out better for you and your wife.
Oh, it's all good.
Yeah.
It's all good. All right. We're guided here, so it's all good.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right. Well,
thanks.
We'll see you soon, Dave.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
A good pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to us at Touching Into Presence. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. You can find out more about David at rolftucson.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate it if you'd leave a positive review of the podcast and subscribe to it through the platform of your choice. When you do this, it really helps other people find us, and we greatly appreciate your support. We look forward to hearing back from you and seeing you on our next conversation at Touching Into Presence. Bye for now.